Hello and welcome to the Daily Workout. I'm Angela Cripps, the MD of the Recruiting Gym. This gentleman shouldn't need no introduction, but as we are international, good evening, Greg Savage. How are you?
Yes, good evening. I'm well. It's 6 o'clock in Sydney. Hello, Angela. 6 o'clock in Sydney on a Monday night, and all good. Thank you very much.
You had a good start to your week?
Yeah, I did actually. It's been a very busy 2 weeks because I've been doing the launch of my new book around Australia. And as you would know, Angela, your geography is that good. Australia is big. So even going to Perth is the same as going from London to Moscow. Not that one probably would want to do that, but that's the distance. So been all over the place.
I'd rather go to Perth. Yeah, I've worked in Australia. You think it's one, well, it is obviously one island. Well, no, I've been to Tasmania as well working, but you don't realise how far it is. Just every trip that you do is just phenomenal, isn't it? But
it's big and empty. And when you leave the country, it's about 8 hours before you can sort of land in another country, unless it's New Zealand or, very
but
close.
even New Zealand, when I went there, it's 4 hours from Sydney. I was like, what? I thought it was right next to it. No, it's not at all. Yeah. But you mentioned the book tour there. This week is about my life in recruitment. We're going to get into that in a second. But you were on our book week recently. Have you got the book there? Give us a little plug, Charlotte.
This is the book. It's called Recruit. This is the first one, which you can still get, of course. That's more autobiographical and good for people who want to hear about building of recruitment companies and all the many blunders I made doing that and the few things I got right. This is pretty simple. I've taken the lessons from it. I was a recruiter, Angela. I was a good recruiter, but I wasn't anywhere near the best. I worked with, a lot of much better recruiters. But I've distilled it all down into, there's 128 chapters on how to be a great agency recruiter. And each chapter is on a skill, competency, or mindset. So, the feedback I've had, we had nearly 1,000 recruiters on this speaking tour, and they say the new ones love it, and the older ones, more experienced ones, say, wow, there were a few tips, but also I just realized how many things I knew that I'm not doing. So that's helpful.
That's the thing. There's so much to this job. You can't remember it all the time. And if you're not doing it every day, it does get dropped. And then you realize, why did I stop doing that? That worked really well. So great reminders there as well. You've talked about a tour in Australia, but you're actually coming here, aren't you, quite soon with the REC? Are you going to do a tour with you?
Yes, I'm doing a big tour, and any dates of that tour that are alongside the Rugby World Cup are totally coincidental, and there's no plan. But I am coming to the UK. I love to do, as you know, I've been there so many times. And there's 6 cities, so pretty much everyone should be able to get to one. They are Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, Belfast, and London, I guess. London. And it's a morning, and it's highlights of the book, really the distilled version on how to be great as a recruiter. Everyone gets the book. I hope it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm hoping people will turn up. Actually, 200 have signed up in the first week, so I'm hopeful I won't be on my own.
Brilliant. Yeah, I saw that come out last week. So we'll get the link in there. Charlotte, go find it. The REC will be advertising it, and we'll get those dates in there for you. So this week, we're doing My Life in Recruitment. So am I right? It's 44 years for you? Oh, mine's, sorry. I nearly took it away from you.
Go ahead.
I just realised it's my 34th anniversary today, 7th of the 8th. Yeah. Oh, no.
Wedding anniversary?
Next week. It's all right. It's morning here. I'm not quite with it yet.
Recruitment anniversary?
Yeah, next week it is. It's next Monday, 34 years.
Well done. Well, you're looking pretty good for 34 years. Well done. So I started in January 1980, which I guess in 6 months will be 44 years. So it's 4 decades, 4.5 decades across the world, and I guess a lot of successes and a lot of mistakes and failures too. But you've got to have those.
Well, we want to hear about those. I'm going to ask you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But first of all, take yourself back 44 and a half years ago, or 43 and a half. How did you get into recruitment in the first place?
It's actually quite coincidental that we're having this chat this week, because on Thursday I'm flying down to Adelaide. And the reason I'm flying down to Adelaide is it's the 40th anniversary of the Burnside Rugby Union Club being in the grand final, which I was in that game. We lost, but we still celebrated 40 years later. And I came to Australia when I was 20 from South Africa. I did 1 year at university, and I was looking for a job. I thought, you you didn't talk about recruitment in those days, really. It wasn't well known, pre-internet, obviously. And I thought I was going to go into personnel management. Even the phrase HR, let alone talent acquisition, was not known, right? So I thought personnel management, and I was applying for jobs. My sister had a friend whose dad ran an executive search firm. And she got me a meeting, and ostensibly it was for him to give me some career guidance. And he was a lovely man, and he said, Greg, you don't have any skills or experience that our clients would hire. And these were his words. But you seem like a likely lad. How would you like to be an executive search consultant? I said, absolutely. What is it again? Didn't really know. But it was fabulous. Very lucky because, like most people, fell into recruitment. But I didn't even know what it was at that time.
Wow.
And it was executive search, right, which was a twin-edged sword. It was tremendously fortunate because we sold retainers and exclusivity, or the retainers. And in those days, client-paid advertising, an ad in the paper, it cost a lot of money. So you had to sell a lot before you even started work. And that set me up for, I guess, the belief in the value of what we do. So that's been, but then I was just lucky on a basic level to fall into a job that, sure, I worked hard at, but it was perfectly suited for my temperament. So I was lucky.
I think that's a good
grateful.
point. Yeah, the executive search, when I joined, it always felt like it was a cut above. So to get into that to start with was really hard here in the UK. You had to have been a recruiter beforehand to do that. So great opportunity for you to be at that high level.
It was completely bizarre because I was 21 and the next youngest guy in the company, and all the recruiters or executive search consultants were men. This was 45 years ago, right? They were all men. And the youngest one, apart from me, was 40. They all had lots of commercial experience. So I suffered from very, very serious imposter syndrome, except it wasn't a syndrome. I kind of was an imposter. And I used to go, and all my clients were CFOs and CEOs in their 40s, 50s. And there I was, 3 years out of boarding school in Africa. No kidding, right? Of course, I learned fast. And 2 or 3 years later, I wasn't so on top of my game. That's nonsense. But I was much more confident. And my salary was $10,000 a year. Nothing wrong with that. It was 40 years ago.
That's a lot.
But a retainer was $3,000 or $4,000, and the ad was $3,000 or $4,000. So when I took a job, I had to sell almost 80% of my annual salary up front before doing any work. So that teaches you to really sell. It was fabulous.
You mentioned imposter syndrome there, actually. Our guest tomorrow, Lauren Harrop, she's just done a talk on that at RecFest. That she's been a recruiter for many years, but that's what she talks about a lot. So it'd be interesting to see if you can drop on tomorrow and have a listen to her. So that's how you got in. Right place, right time, right. My mum always said it's who you know, not necessarily what you know. So that was very opportunist there. Serendipity at its best to get you into our industry. So let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly then. So in your career, what would you say has been those three elements?
Well, my mind's sort of boggling at I have to take them one by one. Yeah. Overall, it's all been good. If you take it as a whole, it's all been good because I've had such fun. I've met such fantastic people. I've traveled the world. I've had success to the extent that it's made me feel good about what I do, and financially it's been great. So no, all that brilliant. But there's also the need to remember that in anything, I'm sure, but in recruitment, you are going to have a lot of disappointments. And I talk to a lot of young recruiters, and I say to them, let me tell you, you are going to have a lot of disappointments. So don't get a shock. No matter how good you are, you're going to have a lot of disappointments. And I suppose some of the ones that I would mention are recessions that we've been through. It's been tough, extremely tough. Started a company in 1987. I know it's hilarious. I think I was 27. When Hayes bought the company I was with, we left, three of us, and started Recruitment Solutions. And we built that company eventually. It was listed on the stock exchange. It was very successful and all that. But 3 years after we started, we had a massive recession. And we were already 75 people in 5 offices. Oh. And I was about 31. And we had to let 2/3 of our staff go. We had to close 2 offices. I mean, that was terrible. My house was mortgaged against it. It was a terrifying, an incredibly challenging situation. As it turns out, there's always a yin and a yang in life and in recruitment. That recession was the making of us because 60% of recruitment companies in Australia went bust, and I don't celebrate that.
It cleared out the competition, didn't it?
I don't celebrate it, but we still had 30 people, and when it took off, we took off because we developed all these relationships sort of forged by fire through the tough time with clients. And our consultants were strong and resilient. And so, that was the growth. So you can see the opposites, I guess. And then another down, I suppose, was when I was running Aquent, which is when I say I was running Aquent, I was the international CEO. But that's American companies. So when they call you the international CEO, what they mean is everything outside of America.
Yeah.
But that was a lot. It was 35 offices in 17 countries. And we flew. And it's in my book. I got a bit, I think complacent's the wrong word. That's not part of my DNA. But I certainly, there was hubris. Like I thought I'd had 5 years of consistent growth and everything we did worked. And even though I knew that it was because the market was good. We were good, but the market was good. I still kind of felt it couldn't go wrong. And then the GFC, as we call it, I don't think you do, but the 2008, 2009 came along. And I was exposed. Look, the company was still fine. We were a very good company, but I had a lot of officers with poor management, a lot of consultants who didn't really have good relationships. The technology wasn't as good as I thought it was. We were very perm-orientated in some cities, and that hurt us. And so suddenly my palace started to crumble, and it was very chastising because I knew as it started to happen, I thought I knew this would happen, but I just submerged it because I was on such a good run. And that's a lesson I often talk to owners about, that you've got to ride the wave, but you've always got to be thinking about before COVID, I didn't know COVID was coming, but I thought a recession was coming. And I said to all my clients, what would happen if your gross profit dropped by 60%? And they were like, why would you ask that question? I said, because it's going to happen one day. And they're like, don't be silly. It did happen, not for the reason I thought. But you run that scenario and you say, what would we do? How would we get through? So there was that. And then I started a company called Firebrand. And that never achieved the goals that I set out to do. It was meant to be a clever play where I bought, I think it was 10 offices of Aquent in a management buyout. They were in 8 different countries. So it was quite an ambitious ploy. And it was at the bottom of the market, I thought. And I thought, okay, I've timed it perfectly. We will take these businesses over and then we'll ride the wave. Only problem was it took 3 years to come back.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to build a business in 8 countries, on limited resources, because it was like a startup in a way. So that we sold it and it was okay, but nothing like what we expected. And so there are a lot of disappointments.
I do think we're in that situation at the moment, actually. We've had a lot of companies that have had 2 years coming out of COVID riding the wave, and we had 10 years after the recession then as to actually be on a high. And we've got lots of companies now that are struggling this year because they haven't got the relationships. They've not been doing the BD. They don't know how to develop those relationships. And they're really struggling because all of a sudden, that easy pickings that have been there have all gone.
Yeah, you're 100% right. It's the same across the world. And, I don't want to be too harsh on people because we came out of COVID and then we all had a shock when it really boomed, right? Yeah. But the problem with that was that jobs were pouring in the door and recruiters got very good at servicing that in a kind of transactional way, because if you got a half good candidate in front of a client during that period, they would hire them. And now, as I said the other day on this talk that I've been doing, there's a whole generation of recruiters with 3 years experience who've never done a client meeting in their lives. Yeah. And they don't know how to qualify a job order, and they do not know how to initiate a relationship with a client or develop it. And the thing we've got, as from a business owner's point of view, you've got to maximize the opportunities when they're there, but you've always got to have one eye on what you know is going to happen, because while I can't predict the next recession in terms of its date, I can tell you you'll have one.
Yeah.
Because we always do. So we've got to be smart about preparing ourselves and being nimble when that is, when that's on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I take the rough guess of every 10 years. My experience has been pretty much every 10 years, dead on. So we were expecting it to 2018, 19. We're like, it's coming, it's going to be here at some point. And then, of course,
so was I. And it came, but it was COVID. But I think we were going to have something anyway at that time.
Definitely.
Economic.
Okay, so we've had the good, we've had the bad, the ugly. What would you say has been?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean. by ugly.
Not nice. Not necessarily
yeah.
a bad situation, but just not nice. Ugly.
Well, there's the thing is that life and business is full of that. And that's why you've got to set yourself up to make sure that the balance edges in favor of success and working with people you like and respect. And that means you've got to fire clients and you've got to build a team of people whose behavior actually meets your stated values, which, by the way, is the biggest hypocrisy I see in recruitment. You know, we are this, that, the other thing, except for Betty, who's the highest biller, and she can do whatever she likes. You know, you've seen it before, I'm sure.
True.
So I think some of the things that have been tough are unethical clients who abuse the system, and there's not many, but it does happen. Play recruiters off each other. I think the whole multi-listing job order framework of our industry is totally dysfunctional and causes most of the pain in recruitment for recruiters, clients, and candidates. Let me take you through that. So, you know, you've got a situation, and I asked 1,000 recruiters in the last 2 weeks, and across Australia, the average was 1 out of 4. They fill one job out of 4. I believe in the UK it's worse. Okay, so let's say it's 1 out of 4. That means that 75% of the time, all these recruiters who are coming to work and working that hard are failing 75% of the time. Mm. That is what causes burnout, is relentless failure. And the reason for it, it's complicated, but is that the whole multi-listed job order thing means we're competing on the basis of speed instead of on quality. Yep. Excuse me. Clients think they get a better service by getting people to compete. That is absolute nonsense. Any recruiter with heart their salt will gravitate back to clients who give them commitment and put the energy into that client. And the other clients will get about 25% of their commitment from the recruiter in return. Yep. And then candidates, recruiters don't come to work. You'll know this actually as much as anybody. Recruiters don't come to work and have a meeting and say, listen, how can we piss off our candidates today? I want some good pissing off candidate strategies. They want to service but they can't. Some of them are just bad, but some of them want to, but they can't because they're handling so many job orders where they fill 1 out of 4. Yeah. And they're chasing their tail. So I think that, as much as, you know, I've managed it through my career and try to make sure my companies were more towards exclusivity and retainers and coach recruiters on that. That is the ugly of recruitment, I think that's a good because one. It leads to so many poor outcomes.
Yeah, that is a good ugly, I must admit. And the last stat I had here in the UK was 23%. So actually pretty similar in that scenario.
So 23%, but then people lie and they don't believe. You know, if you go to a recruiter and say, what percentage of jobs do you fill? The recruiter will say 1 out of 3. And then you'll take all the jobs they've had in the last year and divide it by placements, and it'll be 1 out of 5. 5. Yeah. They haven't actually lied. They
haven't worked out their stats. There we go. There's one of your workouts for today. Go and find out your fill ratio. So whether it's a ratio, 1 out of 3, or whether it's a percentage, I'm feeling 23%, whatever one speaks to you, use that and just make it better every month. And if you're working on it over a period of time, it will get better and better. And that can double your revenue without doing any more work if you can double your fill rate. Right.
So that what you just said there, there is the most valuable thing that anyone has said on this call, because that is exactly right. So I have clients, I know we've got lack of time. I have clients who worried that the jobs per recruiter have gone down from 12 to 10. And they're all, jobs are falling. And I'm like, well, hold on. What would be a good month for a recruiter to fill how many? 2. So you can fill 2 out of 10. You don't need 12. In fact, it's better to have 10 if they're good quality orders. Yeah. And as you said, increase your ratios. And it comes down to good old-fashioned, this book is full of it. Good old-fashioned, like qualifying a job order, selling exclusivity, working with candidates who've got the skills but also got the motivation to accept the job. All those sorts of things. If we can get our recruiters better at that, they won't need any more jobs because they'll fill a higher percentage of them.
Well, that may be the answer to the last question, but I'm going to give you the opportunity of adding another one. Your top tip for someone that's joining the industry now or thinking of joining, what would you like to have been told that 43 odd years ago before you started?
Don't drink so much after work, Greg. That's good. That was in London, by the way. That was terrible 2 years for my health. No, 2 things I'll tell you. One is, yes, it's what I was talking about, but I'll sum it up like this. you don't have a future in recruitment, particularly with the emergence of automation and AI, unless you have highly sophisticated human influencing skills. Mm. Recruitment is made up a series of moments of truth, taking a job order, preparing a candidate for interview, debriefing the client after interview, making the offer, countering a counter offer. There's dozens of them. That's where the leverage is, because all the rest of the job will be automated and machines will do it far better than us. But ChatGPT can't handle a counter offer, nor can it convince a candidate to go for an interview when in your heart you know she should go. And then she goes because you articulated it to her and she loves it and she gets the job. Well, that's where the value in recruitment is. So highly sophisticated, and that means if you believe that, and if you don't, you're wrong. If you believe that, then you need to understand that you've got to really engage with people and you can't hide behind digital. We've got to use the technology for what it's brilliant at, but use our influencing skills for what that's brilliant at. That's the first one. And the second one is guard your reputation, the most valuable thing you have that you take from job to job. There's only two things you take when you move. One is your skills, which you own. Unless you steal a computer, Angela, which would be silly, the only two things you'll take is your skills and your reputation. And I think recruiters would be well advised to take a longer term view and understand that if you really want to be long term in this business, which, by the way, the vast majority of recruiters who enter this business don't last 2 years, and by 5 years it's fallen off to 20% survival rate. If you really want, and then they leave the industry and say it's a Mickey Mouse industry, it's not rocket science, but what it really means is I couldn't do it well. So you've got to build your reputation. And your reputation is made up not of what you put on LinkedIn. What you put on LinkedIn will amplify what is already a good reputation, but it won't hide a bad reputation, because a bad reputation or a good reputation is made up of all the small moments of interaction with people, the phone call returned or not returned, the snappy reply, the white lie you told a client, which wasn't a white lie, it was a black lie, and the client found out, and they'll never trust you. And you will find that not only will you sleep a lot better at night, but you'll also find that over time you get recommendations, referrals, repeat business, opportunities, introductions, doors open. And that is very good for your self-esteem, but it's also good for your commercial success. And so I would advise people, sophisticated human influencing skills to create outcomes is where the magic in recruitment is. And if your job does not get you doing that, and if your job is just screening resumes and referring resumes and setting up interviews logistics, you won't have a job in 2 years because other stuff will do it quicker. But if you can influence people for the greater good, when I say influencing, I don't mean pushing someone into a job she doesn't want that's not good for her.
No.
I mean influencing for the greater good, like advising a client that the salary is too low. It's all the old stuff, but it's just that a lot of people have made a living out of recruitment without those skills, and they won't anymore.
I think that's a really good point. Make sure, again, it's all about the interactions. It's all about the relationships, the influencing skills. That's where we make a difference. So let's focus on those, because that's where we'll still have an industry in even 5 years' time. Who knows where we're going to be?
Who knows beyond that? But I'd say the next, you're exactly right. By the way, I've just seen somebody on the chat from Johannesburg. Vanessa. Goeiemorgen, Vanessa. Hoe gaan het met jou vandaag? She'll understand.
Vanessa's our sourcing coach here in the recruiting gym, along with Catherine Robinson. So
she says hi. She's a long-standing mate of mine.
Over on LinkedIn. Stephen O'Donnell's saying hello as well.
Yes, Cindy, I know Stephen. He's up there in Scotland, I imagine. Is he?
Cindy's in South Africa as well, I think. You've got a few friends there that are saying hello to. Thank you so much, Greg. Always a pleasure. Always some great things.
You too.
We've got quite a few workouts there for people. We'll make sure this one actually is available to everyone, not just in the daily workout. It'll go in DW Lite. So if you haven't got access to DW Lite, click on the green button, come into the gym, sign up. We've got 6 free courses for you so that you can get access to great content like this. Wonderful. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Angela.
Bye-bye.
Bye.